What's happening, crypto fam? You're tuned in to the Elite Wealth Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of crushing it in the Web3 and cryptocurrency space. I'm Tyler Brewer, alongside the co-host Garrison, Rolley, and since 2016, we've been educating, enriching, and empowering hundreds of students across the globe on how to make waves and create generational wealth in this space.
Each episode, Tyler and I keep it real with you, analyzing the top market movers and industry leaders, the latest news, and how to avoid the potholes on the road to crypto riches. We're industry vets who have guided students over 500% gains in this wild 2024 market.
If you're a rookie crypto trader or a seasoned investor, you're in the right hands. We will teach you how to level up your mindset and skills to really capitalize on this decentralized revolution.
Subscribe now and join us every week as we lead you step by step into elite digital wealth with the Elite Wealth Podcast. What's going on, everybody? It's Crypto G here with Elite Wealth Strategies, and I'm here with Tyler. Today, in this episode, we are going to cover the history of money, really, and mainly fiat currency. What we want to do first is, we want to cover the history of money and what led to fiat, so you guys kind of have a good understanding of, really just the history of money. So hopefully you guys will learn a few things today. Tyler, I'd like to pass it over to you, man. Where did money start?
Bro, well, money.
Or well, we don't have to go all the way back to like let's pick a starting point.
Yeah, so let's start back realistically, like, what is money, right? Well, money is a good traded for another good. It's a medium of value, right? And it could be anything realistically. In some points in time, it was cattle, it was salt, it was seashells, it was glass beads, it was little limestone rocks with holes in them. Sometimes it was boulders, big boulders, and just everybody knew who owned it. But the thing is there's no stipulations on what can or cannot be money. There's no regulation on what makes it have to be money, right? Anything could technically be money. If I want to trade something to Garrison, right? If I want to trade my cat, say Garrison wanted my animal Pocahontas for maybe his webcam, right? If he was willing to do that, we could exchange, right? So there's always been exchanging. There's always been a medium of exchange, right? Before we were doing bartering with, like I just mentioned, with a webcam for a cat, or, maybe I'd trade my mouse for his keyboard, right? We were bartering, but then it kind of got complicated in the sense where, what if Garrison didn't want my mouse or my cat, but I still wanted his webcam? Well, now I have to go and find what he wants, which makes it hard. But what if there was one thing everybody wanted, right? The medium of exchange. So that's where money comes from. And ultimately that's where really money kind of started. Now there's been multiple types of different money. Like I said, limestone, people have used cattle. Sometimes cattle still used today. But rock, salt, there's the glass beads, seashells. But as we all know, like, why would I want to value a seashell, right? But in certain places, it was hard to find seashells. They were valuable, right? Imagine gold. The gold, you can't just go outside and find it on the ground. It's valuable because you can't go do that. It's hard to find.
Right.
Making it valuable. So really, let's go back, bro, until in really 1791. 1791 is really when the first Bank of the U.S. opened. And then we have in 1816, gold became the standard of England. About another 50, 60 years after that, roughly 50 years, Europe adopts the gold standard. And then in 1900, the U.S. follows suit with the Gold Standard Act. Now, there was the gold standard exchange and there was the gold standard. There was two different versions of it. So in 1913, the Federal Reserve was created, and in 1929, the Great Depression started, and it lasted about 10 years until 1939. Now, what's important at this time frame, right? We're talking about money. What was being used during these time frames? What were people using for money? What did Garrison want to buy my Pocahontas for? What was he willing to give me for my Pocahontas? So money, guys, we had the gold standard, and the gold standard was people actually physically using gold. And as we all know, almost all metals are heavy. And gold specifically is heavier than a lot of metals. So
very heavy.
number one, it doesn't make sense to carry a lot of it around, right? If you need to carry a lot of money or move a lot of money from one place to another, it's not as easy, right? Especially if you have a lot of gold. Now, if you didn't have a lot of gold, that wasn't the big deal, right? But the thing is people were using these gold stamp coins. So these gold stamp coins, if you didn't have a lot of money, you were likely trimming these gold off of these gold stamp coins. Most likely, right? Because you wanted to accumulate gold and people were saving this gold, melting it down, and then kind of making their own gold bars. Now, gold at that time, people were making fake gold coins, right? They were using different metals and they were made to look like gold. So there was errors in this money system, as was using seashells, glass beads, salt, right? There was a lot of reasons why those didn't work. Same with gold being, it was heavy. People were pretty much stealing it. They were faking the money. It wasn't even technically right. They were using fake coins. So there was a lot of things happening. Now, after this, we moved to something called the gold exchange, right? Where people use gold reserve notes. Now, these gold notes could be exchanged for gold, right? This made it a little bit easier to carry around money. So in 1933, FDR, he made holding gold illegal in 1933, right? The Great Depression, this is during the Great Depression. And he said, storing gold is illegal. You can no longer store gold. And at this time, what happened, and they claim they did this due to hard times, right? That they gathered all the gold because what they wanted to do was print more money because they had these gold or these paper notes that were redeemable for gold. You could always go and get gold with these paper notes, right? The paper we have today is something we call fiat currency, which we'll go into a little bit later once we get down the timeline. But during this time frame, right, FDR, he made it illegal to hoard gold. Anything over $100 of gold, you could have jewelry, but anything over $100 of gold, you could face up to 10 years or a 10K fine. And 10K in that day is about $236,000 in today's money. So to put into perspective how much you were going to get fined if you got caught hoarding gold, holding gold, right? So what did the US government do? They confiscated the gold. At what price, though? At what price? $20.67 an ounce. Now, think about this, right? What's the price of gold today? It's about $2,000 an ounce. Actually, it might be a little bit higher than that. I don't know the exact price on it, but gold is worth quite a bit more. Now, like I said, 10,000 back then in 1933 is about $236,000 in today's money. But what happened, right, is the US confiscated this gold and they made it illegal to hold it, buy it, sell it, trade with it. And guess how much they bought? They confiscated back, right? They bought 5 million pounds of gold. People are like, I don't know, it couldn't have been that effective, right? Yeah, it was. They bought
Imagine how
five,
hard it is to move that. Five
yes,
million pounds of it.
and it's insane. So the next year, right? And then remember, they could print these gold notes depending on how much gold they actually held. So what did they want to do? They wanted to buy and hold more gold so they could print more currency. So what they did in 1934 is they actually kind of manipulated price, but they pumped the price of gold to $35 an ounce, right? Because they had just bought all of that gold, 5 million pounds of gold at $20.67 an ounce. So meaning they inflated the gold price, they pumped the gold price up 75%, right? And you couldn't even hold any in the US. It was illegal to hold, and they were like, yeah, we're gonna pump the price up. So imagine you're holding this asset, right? You're holding gold, and at this time in history, this gold is a necessity, right? It's money. And then imagine the government's like, you can't hold it anymore. And then the next year it goes up 75% in value. Bro, Garrison, how
They
upset
just,
would you be?
dude, I
Like,
mean, so think about it, bro. They took everybody's money and, gave them some paper back in reality, which made sense at the time, you don't want to carry all the gold, so, I'll get this paper instead. But they took everybody's gold and then they were like, all right, we're not going to get rid of it unless it's $35 an ounce. So it's not that gold went up. They kind of confiscated so much gold that they could decide where the price was. And, that's that's what happens when you, I guess, when you give into a controlled system like that. Um, but yeah. So where are we at on the timeline again, Tyler?
So
I'm sorry.
timeline wise, we're 1934. We're
Okay.
1934. FDR's president. Gold just pumped up to $35 an ounce thanks to the FDR, right? Thanks to the Gov, the feds, whatever you want to call them. So
Which
gold
it could
got
be good. It could have been good for some people that were holding it, but at the end of the day, it's just, inflating the price.
yeah, uh, realistically. So, they pumped it up 75%. Now, again, like I said, at this time, depending on how much gold the US had, they could print money. So $1 of gold was equal to $2.50 of paper, right? So every $35 of gold that they owned, it meant that they had about 87.50 worth of paper money that they could print. So every time they got another ounce of gold, they could print more money, right? Because it was backed by gold. So now at this time, it kind of incentivized investors and traders to bring their gold to the US to trade. Why? Because it was $35 an ounce. So they pumped it up. So then people were bringing their gold to the US to sell. This matters a little bit here later, right? So they're bringing their gold here and they're kind of arbitrage trading this. So like what they would do is bring gold from another country where it was cheap and easy to find, and then they would bring it to the US and sell it because it was worth more. So again, in this 1934 same year, silver actually got the same treatment. It was also illegal to hold. You couldn't actually
Wow.
even hold silver jewelry, bro. Imagine you're walking around, you got earrings and a nose ring, and a cop's like, is that silver? Do you have
Give it
gold on,
here.
sir? Brings you to jail, bro. Like imagine that. That would
Jeez.
be insane. So 1934. So then in 1939, we have the start of World War II. And World War II lasted from about 1939 to 1945. And guys, at the end of World War II, the US held well over, closer to 70 than 50, but well over 50%, half the world's gold's reserve,
Wow.
right? Because what were people doing? They were bringing their gold to the US, right? The investors, big whales, right? Gold whales. They're bringing them over and selling it to the US because could make more money on it. They were arbitrage trading it, right? And in today's time, it's a lot easier to do that because we have phones and internet. And back then, it was a little bit harder because they had to physically bring and go to the exchange. So now, fast forward from about 1939 to about 1944, as World War II comes to an end, and this is where we switch over to something called the Bretton Woods system, right? So we were at the gold standard, then kind of the gold standard exchange, and then now we go over to the Bretton Woods system. And the Bretton Woods system, ultimately, this is after the World War, so the U.S. was chosen as the main currency. Now, these other countries, and what had happened, right? These other countries during this Bretton Woods meeting, these other countries were allowed to exchange their currency for the US dollar, and then the US dollar to get gold. So that was incentivized what? More trading with the US, which was good for the US and also any country that continued to constantly trade with the US. So other nations actually fixed their currency to the US dollar, which was pegged at the time to 1 ounce of gold, about 35, which was $35. So let's again fast forward from 1944 to about 1966, because at this point in time, all these other nations were sick of the US stockpiling gold, right? Because guess what? People were arbitrage trading. They were bringing their gold to the US, getting their $35 an ounce. And in a way, this was a way that the US used to stockpile gold, right? Kind of like it's kind of like a
It was pretty smart. I can't
it
lie,
was smart. It was a dirty move, bro. It was a dirty move. Like, hey, bro,
Yeah.
let me hold this for you, and in return, we'll allow you to trade your money for our money, and then our money for gold.
And it's a
And the
lot
guy's like,
lighter and
yeah,
easier to move?
what could go wrong, bro? What could go wrong? It sounds like a great plan. I'm in. Sign me up. But so 1966, these other nations had pretty much they're sick of the US stockpiling gold, and then what were they doing? Printing more money. So they would get more gold, and guess what? Remember, every ounce of gold they had meant they could print $87.50 of paper money. So a lot of these nations said, "Yo, we give us our gold. We want that stuff
We
back.
want our gold back.
Deliver it to us. And they said, you're gonna deliver that stuff to us. And 5 years later, Richard Nixon, your boy,
We're in
Richard Nixon,
1971, right?
of 1971,
1971.
he severs the US from this gold standard, right? But also suspending the convertibility from the dollar to gold, meaning these other countries couldn't just bring their US dollar in like these paper notes were no longer like you could have all like millions of dollars, and that meant you had millions of dollars in gold. So you could go to the bank at any time and go get gold. This meant that was no longer a thing. You just had a paper. You had a
Wow.
paper that said $20 but before it meant $20 of gold, right? And $35 was an ounce of gold. So it was about roughly an ounce of gold, right? You were just shy of an ounce of gold. So, yeah, 1971, Nixon severed the US from the gold standard. He suspended the convertibility, meaning, again, you can no longer demand gold for your dollars. And then
And
3 years
also,
later,
my
one,
fault,
one
my fault.
last one last thing to turn this up, bro. One last thing.
Yeah.
19 years later, the Americans could finally hold and store and buy gold again after it didn't matter because it's no longer a currency, right? But they weren't allowed to hold it when it was a store of value. They couldn't just stockpile. They had to stockpile dollars. So yeah, after 40 years of pretty much a scam, yeah, you can actually hold gold again, but it's not like you can redeem your dollars for gold. So I mean, why
Yeah.
would you
So
want
they
gold?
basically got to collect a bunch of gold. And then when people are like, we want it back, they're like, actually, we're going to temporarily ban this, which because it was originally only supposed to be temporarily banned, but it's
Yeah,
50 years later and we're still temporarily banned from that. So
exactly, bro. And
doesn't seem like we're going back there.
right, and but what that led us to is something that we wanted to cover today, which is what? Fiat currency. So Garrison, what is fiat currency? By definition, what is fiat currency? And then what would you, if somebody asked you on the streets, how would you tell them what fiat currency is?
So just for everyone that doesn't really know what fiat currency is, like you said, I'm going to read the book definition. This is from Wikipedia. It's fiat money is a type of currency that is not backed by a precious metal such as gold or silver. It is typically designated by the issuing government to be a legal tender, and the authorized and is authorized by government regulation. So, and since the end of like we just talked about the Bretton Woods system, all the major currencies in the world turned to fiat money because they were no longer backed by a precious metal like gold. Um, Fiat money generally doesn't have any intrinsic value and does not use value, or I'm sorry, let me reread that. Fiat money generally does not have any intrinsic value and does not have use value. It has value only because the individuals who use it as a unit or account, they give it value. So we've all agreed that the US dollar is valuable to us, so that's why if I wanted to say Tyler wanted to buy something from me. He's like, here's $100. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I don't want your cat or your webcam or something like that. So, um, now I'll go into my own definition and basically, I guess my definition's pretty simple. It's just money backed by nothing. It's as simple as it gets. Like that's the first sentence from Wikipedia. Fiat money is a type of currency that is not backed by a precious metal such as gold or silver. So I keep it very simple when it comes down to that. Fiat is money backed by nothing. Tyler, did you want to give your own definition as well?
Yeah, I just really wanted to cover because there is multiple definitions of the word fiat. You look at
Yeah,
the
true.
Oxford.
It can be like a noun. It's used in the English language.
Yeah, exactly,
So,
bro. So you look at the Oxford Dictionary definition of it, and it's a formal authorization or proposition, a decree. Well, most people probably don't know what either of these words by definition are. And because again, I didn't either, which is okay. But the
yeah.
thing is, once you start learning and understand this, it'll start to make so much sense why fiat money is not great. So, what is a decree? A decree is an official order issued by legal authority, meaning forced, right? And then again, you look up the word fiat, it's Latin. You look up the Latin meaning of fiat, it's to let be done, forced. So when it was gold, right, people chose to want to store gold because it was hard to find. People store fiat because they don't have much of a choice or they don't know better, right? Because when you look at the current standard or the current fiat system as of recently, right, it's 2024. Well, since 2020 to 2023, the US, the dollar inflated, right? The US dollar inflated 25% in 3 years. So, in order to keep up with inflation, just to keep up, to retain wealth, you need to make about 7 to 10%. There's
Is
Pocahontas
that
on
a
some show.
wand? Oh, I thought you were casting a spell on us.
Pocahontas making a show, but you look at the fiat systems that we have now, and those fiat systems, again, it's backed by nothing.
Right.
Um, and there's multiple different, right? So I have a few here that I want to list that we went over in our timeline, right? So these are all countries that had fiat currency and they did not work. So we had Germany's paper mark, the 1920s, Russia's ruble in the 1920s and the 1990s. We had Hungary's pengo in the 1940s, which we'll talk about just a little bit here. We have Greece's drachma in 1940s, Argentina's austria in the 1980s. We have Yugoslavia's dinar in the 1990s, Argentina's peso in the 1990s. We have the ZAR, Democratic Republic Congo ZAR, in the 1990s. We have Zimbabwe's dollar in 2009, and just as of recently, Venezuela's Bolivar. Now, when
It's
we look
10.
again, we look at the US dollar since 2020, inflation's up about 25%, meaning if you had 100K in a savings account from 2020 to 2023, you lost about $25,000 worth of purchasing power due to inflation. Now, you still have the $25,000, but the same way that fine earlier, right? If you held gold, it was 10K or 10 years. If that was today's money, it would be 236,000 or 10 years. So you look at that inflation, right? So just to keep up and retain wealth, you need to make about 6 to 8% a year just to retain wealth when you store money in fiat currency, right? And if you want to keep money for a long period of time, you need to understand it. There's a few things you need with money. You need it to be hard to print, right? So there's easy and hard money. Easy meaning it's easy to make, easy to print. Gold is hard because you have to go mine it. It takes energy. It takes time. It's not always, it doesn't always guarantee returns. Like you could go dig for a month and never find gold, right? It's
That's
hard.
obviously why a lot of people like wanted it. So that's what, what gave it that
And
medium of exchange there.
And even today, it's a store of value because it holds its value. Because again, it's
Right.
hard to print, it's hard to make more, right? So it's hard, and then it's also the scalability, right? Scalability, the ability to move it across time, to store it across time, to move it across places. How can we break it down into units? Like, property. You can't chip off a chunk of property and buy my cat Pocahontas here because she's not for sale. And also you just can't, you can't do that with property. But
Right.
um, but to go back real quick, I just want to talk because when we look at the history of fiat currencies, and I just listed, I think about 10 of them.
10. And it
Yep.
technically 11 because Germany's crashed twice, you said.
Yep. And Argentina's.
Oh, so that would be 12 then. So depends how you look at it. We'll say 10.
But so regardless, yeah, so looking at Hungary's Pengo in 1945, their hyperinflation really only lasted 1 year, but every single 15 hours, the prices of things doubled.
Wow.
Every 15 hours, the prices
Phew.
doubled. Could you imagine? So meaning you go to work and if you don't get paid that day, the next day it's not even worth picking up the money. It wouldn't even be worth grabbing your money from work if you forgot to grab it the day before. Could you imagine? Like that
You'd
is
have to
insane.
bring like literally wheelbarrows full of money just to like go get milk or something from the store.
Yeah, dude, it's honestly crazy. So when you look at
Yeah.
fiat currency, there's right, there's a bunch of different types of money. And when you look at fiat currency typically and always fails. And if you look at it across time, right, about 50 every 50 years is about when it, crashes. And since 1971, we've been using fiat currency.
And right now we're at about that 50-year mark, and inflation's really hitting harder than ever right now. Like I saw something, and people in 2020 all right, so people now in 2024 have to make 80% more than they did in 2020 to afford a house. Because guys, inflation, you have to make more money, but also the price of things are going up. So it's like a multi-risk asset almost. You're getting this US dollar, but also you made the same amount as you made last year. Housing's going up, and you got to make 80% more to afford a house. And they're not going to add those numbers in inflation. They don't take a look at how much milk has gone up, how much gas has gone up. The government kind of just makes up their own numbers. And is it really only a 25% inflation rate since 2020?
Right. I mean, you look at orange juice specifically, orange juice itself is up 200 something percent, 250 plus. So, like looking at these things and like just normal everyday items, you realize like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, bro, I just think this realistically, guys, this is the kind of generic general breakdown without going too far into depth in this time frame of the breakdown of the monetary systems we've used here in the US, and how kind of they've worked out and how we got to the current system we're using, which is fiat currency. And if you were to again ask me what fiat currency is, it's just a Chuck E. Cheese token. It's ultimately somebody's in control, can print whenever they would like. It's easy to make money. You can print whenever you want. Almost 90% of all currency in US dollar currency that's in circulation today was printed since 2020.
Wow.
So when you look at things like this, you understand how easy it is to print this money. And you look again at the last 3 years, well, excluding 2024. So last 3 years since 2020 to 2023, inflation is 25%, guys, 25%. How can you store your value? Where can you store your value? Well, in our Discord, we actually share that with you. You can click the link below. We have it in all of our social medias and everything like that. Garrison, is there anything else you want to talk on before we wrap it up here?
Yeah, I have one more thing I want to bring up. And like Tyler said, don't forget to check that out because it's can be um whether you're a beginner investor or you know you think you're an expert at investing. We're not in there giving a financial advice. We're just in there telling you guys kind of what we see and what we're doing. Similar like this podcast. We're going to tell you how we feel. In the Discord, we go into specific, more specific assets, mainly cryptocurrency we look at and because it's new and everybody's scared of it. So we're just wanting to educate people like we are right now, because a lot of people, if you're watching this still, you've probably learned a lot today about fiat currency that you never thought you would have even known or even was true. And you can literally fact check all of this. So one thing I
Exactly.
wanted to bring up is um first I want to go over what a Ponzi scheme is, okay? And then I want to go over something else. So this is what a Ponzi scheme is. It's normally a fraudulent investment scheme that promises high return for investors with little or no risk. It's accomplished because instead of using the money invested to build wealth, they bring in more investors to pay off the previous investors. So, you know, Tyler wants to be a part of my investment scheme. He gives me my money and I go find someone else to pay him off, and then I have to find someone else to pay that guy that paid Tyler off. And because, they have promised big returns, it just continues and continues. And when it fails, usually no more new investors can be found, or all the investors, start to sell at the same time. They want their money back, kind of like what happened when people started getting their gold back. And it pretty much just collapses in on itself, and everyone's left out of pocket and out of luck. Like a lot of people with t those paper that said you can get gold. It didn't actually say that on the paper, but you were supposed to be able to go take it back and get your gold back. So let me go over this. I want to go over, I want to tell you guys what the government does when they need money. So government runs out of money all the time. We all know that. I think we're like I don't even want to say the number, like 30 trillion in debt. When the government needs money, they take out a loan with the Federal Reserve, and then the Federal Reserve prints out that money. And in return, they receive an IOU from the US Treasury, the government bonds. That's what it is. It's a government bond. And with these US governments, or with these bonds, the US government, they usually pay their bills and other needs. They don't usually go and try and invest it with the intent to pay back. And meanwhile, the US Treasury and the Federal Reserve, they work really closely to sell these bonds at auctions to foreign banks, pension funds, or even individuals like me and Tyler. And why wouldn't we buy that, right? It should be a virtually risk-free, you're loaning money to the US government. You should get that back eventually, right? But if the loans are being spent on bills and paying off previous loans, then, where does the government get the money they need to pay back the current loan and interest that's going to be charged on it? This is going to be my last question of the day, and we don't even have to answer it. I just want to leave it here as like a little mic drop. But is investing in a US government bond simply just one part of a giant Ponzi scheme? Now, you
Yeah,
guys take that information and do what you want with it. Um, in my opinion, with the definition of Ponzi scheme and the definition of fiat currency that we went over today, they have very similar definitions. So there's other ways to get around that, guys. There's, a lot of rich people or, people that make a bunch of money, they aren't holding their US dollar. They're holding assets like real estate, gold, now
art.
cryptocurrency and art and, you know,
Exactly. Yeah, and
anything
they
like that.
understand this. Like the Warren Buffetts of the world, right? These big investors, they understand this. They know this. They're not holding US dollars.
Guys,
And then when you
go
think
ahead.
about it too, Garrison, you can go and get a loan, right? When some of these big investors can go get a commercial loan for actually cheaper than what the inflation rate is. And usually what happens is kind of like the same, right? They use this loan to pay themselves and then they use all the money for the business. So that's a whole nother episode where you go into, I know we are cutting
Yeah,
close here.
yeah, for sure. This is the last thing I want to say, guys. There's 77,000 pages in the tax documents. 30 of those pages show you how to pay taxes. The rest are on how not to pay taxes. So,
Exactly. So, guys, subscribe now. Join us every single week as we lead you step by step into elite digital wealth with the Elite Wealth Podcast. And together, we're elevating the Web3 and cryptocurrency space. Let's go, guys. Have a good one.
let's go.